Peace. What is up, my conscious music creators? I am OnenO. Welcome back to my blog. And today I'm going to show you an under the hood look at my latest remix called Pop Champagne. The original is by an artist friend of mine named Sinclair. You can find it on Spotify, everywhere online. Just search Pop Champagne OnenO remix and you'll find it. But today we are going to dive deeper into how I created this remix. I'm going to open up my Ableton session and show it all to you. We're going to talk about multi-level mixing, synth layering techniques, how I made transitional effects out of the lead vocal stem, and also I'm going to talk to you about how I use groups inside of groups. So with that being said, let's jump on into the remix. Welcome to my studio. Okay, so I'm about to break down this track, this remix that I did for my artist friend named Sinclair. But for this video, I wanted to just give you a breakdown and show you exactly how I made this track. And I would hopefully like to teach you something in the process. Anything that piques your interest that you're wanting to know more about, just leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to either make another video about it or to answer your comment. But to begin, I think I'm just going to show you the first part of the remix. Just in case you haven't heard the whole thing, I'm going to show the verse, the build, and the first drop. And then we're going to talk about the whole song. So if you haven't heard the whole thing, maybe go over to Spotify, listen to that really quick. But if you just want to pop in here, I'm going to show the first little bit of the song, and then we're going to dive into how I made it.
Let's turn this life from every day to paradise. Can't resist, it's how we're made. Love is a game, come on, let's play.
All right, so that is the beginning of the remix. So let's dive into how I made this track. And there's a couple of main things I'd like to show you on the mixing level before we actually dive into the stems themselves. So what I like to do when I'm mixing my tracks is I like to group everything, and I use groups like you would use buses. And I used to do bussing when I was on like Logic and Reason and stuff, Pro Tools. But now inside of Ableton, I even used to do some bussing in Ableton, but now inside Ableton, I really like the fact that you can use groups as a bus. And so I use groups. Sometimes I even put a group of stuff inside of the main group. It gets a little bit confusing. It's kind of like Inception, but the workflow is so much easier that I like to use groups. So I want to show you the mixing tab. Excuse me, right here. This mixing tab is going to show you the 4 main groups that I have grouped all of my individual tracks into. So you got sound effects, which if you open up, here's all the different sound effects tracks as individual tracks. And then under the vocals, looks like we got about 5 vocal tracks. Under the synths track, it's actually quite sparse. We only have 2 synths in this song. That's because most of this stuff is coming from the bass track. And so I've put under this drum and bass tab right here, you're actually just going to find these 2 groups. So this drum and bass group actually has a drum group inside of it and a bass group inside of it. So in the bass group, we've got 2 main plucks. And then inside the drum group, we've got all the drum stems, kicks and claps and snares and all that fun stuff. So I'll tell you why I do this as this video goes on. I'm sure you're going to pick up my process. But essentially, the reason why I do this is because you have all of these individual, let's just take the sound effects. All these individual sound effects, if we look at the other screen, there's at any given point, several sound effects that are all going on at the same time. And I like to group them together because then I can add some kind of group master compression or chain or something like that. And it looks like on this sound effects tab, I've only done a little bit of that. This is a custom rack that I've made that I use on all of my tracks, no matter what they are. It's just some basic stuff. You got some low cut, some high cut. You got some compression and attack and release on the compression, some saturation, some of the, I'm using an auto filter actually to drive the sound over here. This drive filter is attached to the drive on that auto filter. And then at the end of this chain, we've got a limiter and a master level. And that master is coming from this utility right here. So I like to use this as a default thing on pretty much any track as an individual track. And I also do this type of compression and stuff on groups, on buses. So now that all of my sound effects tracks are grouped into one main group, I can now use this as one main compressor and EQ to be able to shape the whole group. And that is very useful, especially for doing volume control type stuff before it goes to the master level. And so yeah, let me show you a little bit of the drum and the bass stuff just to kind of kick off this little video. So on the other screen here, let's go to this bass sound and let's find that drop. By the way, here in my song view, I like to label all of the sections of my song so I can just know exactly where I am at any given time, especially if all of my windows are closed like this. Now I know, okay, so here is the first bass groove. So open up my drum and bass group. Here's my bass group, and then here's the individual bass tracks. So let's zoom into this first drop, and we're just going to loop this, and I'm going to show you how this track kind of became a thing from the ground up. I started with a really easy 4 on the floor kick pattern, and I was just going through Omnisphere looking for synths. And these are the 2 synths that I came up with. I believe this one is the first synth that I found. I really like that tone. It's got a lot of bass presence, but it's got this really cool kind of sharp pluck sound. But I wanted to find another synth that I could layer in with this, which is, I eventually found this one, which is also an Omnisphere lead. And this has a lot of the lows cut out of it. If we look at the EQ here, a lot of the lows have been cut out just around, what is that, 130 hertz. Because this track is intended to just be the top end of this bass kind of pluck sound. And this is what it sounds like. I'm using this Rob Papin Verb, RP Verb. I absolutely love this reverb sound. So yeah, now I'll show you what those two together sound like. And if you solo the group, we'll hear them both together. I don't have any additional compression or anything on this group. I'm just doing everything on the individual level, putting it into a group. So now if I wanted to change the volume, I could shift the whole group. But yeah, let's just check out the tone. Here's just the main one. Here's the middle one. And together. So you can hear they complement each other very, very well. And because they work so well together, it actually gives me the ability to just have these 2 sounds. And that's literally the meat of the entire track, is just these 2 sounds. And so that's why I'm a huge advocate of if your mix is not sounding right, if you're the type of producer that is making music and you're like, it's just not hitting hard enough, it doesn't have that feel, that raw power that I'm looking for, instead of blaming it on your mix, blame it on your sound. Because a lot of my journey has led me to find really good sounds as the foundation of my track, instead of trying to use average sounds or sounds that I spend very little time finding or creating, and then hoping that the mix will bring them to life. Instead, I like to work with raw, really good sounds from the ground up, because then the mixing process is 10 times easier. So from the bass, let's jump into the drum track. And I'm going to keep this bass soloed, and I'm just going to show you the kick pattern with that bass sound. Let's put in the snare. This is one of my favorite parts because I like do 4 on the floor at the top here, and then I switch to follow the bass pattern for the rest of the progression. It's just something fun. I've never really done that before. I really enjoy that syncopation. It feels like it's about to go 4 on the floor, but all of a sudden it switches into the bass. So yeah, that's the kick and the snare. Then let's look at the rest of the drums here. I'm going to solo just the kick and the snare for a second. Cool. And then here's one loop that I've added onto this. Here's a shaker. And this is a cymbal. And then there's a tambourine here. Here's a crash. And we got one more loop. Pretty cool. So yeah, that's a bunch of the individual drum elements. And now you see, to get back to our mixing conversation, I now have these drums and this bass going through the drum and bass group. And so at this group level, I can now add things like multiband compression and a little bit of glue, as well as some saturation, some limiting, and I have control of the master volume right there. So let me turn off these grouping effects and show you the difference. So this is going to be the drums and the bass soloed, coming out without any group multiband or group compression. Check it out. And now I'm going to add in the multiband. And now this group compression limiting saturation. A lot of my sounds have already been adjusted for volume. So when you're hearing each one of these plugins be turned on, the volume doesn't change very much, but the compression of the sound wave changes quite a bit. And that matters a lot when it comes to our mastering, which we will talk about a little bit later in this video, how I master this track. But before that, let's look at some of these synths. I don't think there's too many synths in this song. Yeah, there's just one pad synth here. And then this is like a low saw kind of synth to beef up that final chorus. So this is what this synthesizer sounds like. Just add a higher octave there. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn on this low synth as well. So we'll solo that. Pretty cool. And yeah, I got a little side chain via the Nicky Romero kickstart going on that saw bass track. It's such a great plugin, by the way. If you don't have it, it's super cheap. It's like $20 or maybe even less. I'm not sure, but a lot of people know about it. But if you don't, go check it out. It's such a really great way to just get sidechain compression immediately. So let's look at the Vox stems. Inside of this Vox stem track, it's going to be pretty chill because for this song, since it's a remix, I got all of the main vocals on this one lead vocal track right here. And then I did a bunch of different vocal effects kind of scattered throughout the song to bring some life, you know, do that remix flair, do that little extra sauce, the extra sprinkle that not everybody's doing on their tracks. So, but most of this is the original track right here. And then I made some of these pieces that are scattered out here as transitional kind of sound effect things that I'll break down for you. So the song begins with her vocal, just pretty normal. Let me just show you what the stem sounds like. All the verb and delay is already printed on this sound.
Power made Game, come on, let's play.
Okay, so then right here in the song, we go to this build up, which let me show you the build without vocals. All right. And then to the chorus. So what I wanted to do for that build is I wanted to take some of the vocal information that we were just hearing in the verse and create kind of a lot of tension and something that we can make a riser out of. So first thing I did was I took that vocal, and this last word here, I believe, is the word play.
Game, come on, let's play.
Yeah, so I took that play and I put it through another track that had a long extended delay. And then I printed that, and that basically turned into this. Oh, why don't we hear it? Oh, here we go. Now the pitching is something I did next. So let me just go ahead and show you exactly how I did this. So let's create a new track right here. And then on this new track, let's find our inputs. I'm going to select, just for convenience, resampling. And now I'm going to hit record. I'm going to solo the lead vocal. And I'm just going to grab a little sample of this vocal. Now, you're probably thinking I could just do that, but there's a little bit of mastering effects going on with this vocal. So I want to take the master level and I want to sample the master level vocal in order to do this effect. So we're just going to go right about here. We're ready to record. So I'm going to hit record and grab this vocal.
On, let's play.
Okay, that's all we got. Now solo this vocal, get off record, hide our inputs. So now I'm going to take this vocal and isolate the word play.
Let's play.
Okay, so there we go, play.
Play.
Great. Now cleaning it up, I'm just going to give it a little fade here. All right, now I'm going to hit Command F, and that'll bring up my Finder. That is my favorite way to load in plugins. All I got to do is type in filter delay. Actually, we're going to do a simple delay. Simple delay, drag and drop. And now here's our simple delay. And what we're going to do is turn the feedback up quite a bit, because we're eventually going to cut off the tail, but I want it to be a long delay. And I think putting it 100% wet is just fine. I like to do quarter notes on both sides, but I also like to have them just slightly off. So I'm going to type in 0.1. So it's going to give us just a little bit of out of sync delay. And it's going to sound really cool. It sounds more stereo that way. So here's what it sounds like. Okay, now even when I stop, it's going to keep going. So I got to undo that, put that back on. Okay, now I'm just going to freeze and print this track. So I'm going to right click over here. I'm going to select freeze track. And now that it's frozen, I'm going to right click again and I'm going to press flatten. And the track is flattened. And now we got this delay in an audio form. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off the ending here. Zoom back in a bit. And then for this vocal thing, now we got this word play that's just really repeating quite consistently, which means we can start to kind of line it up with the grid. So let's find the grid again. I'm going to go ahead and turn off that other vocal.
Game, come on, let's play.
So it's off from the downbeat. I would like to shift it to be on with the downbeat. I'm going to zoom in and put that word play right on the downbeat. That seems to be pretty good. Okay. Now let's hear it one more time.
Game, come on, let's play.
All right, so all I got to do next to replicate this is just fade it in. And now, as you could probably tell earlier, I took this and I chopped it to give it more of that DJ kind of, I don't know how you say it, but like just the rise kind of effect. Okay, so first, before I did the pitch bending stuff, I had to do the chop. So right here, I shift the time. So we gotta just take half of this, duplicate that over, and now take half again. I'm just gonna take that little slice, hit copy, paste here, and duplicate that all the way over. And then we're done there. So now before I can do the pitch bend, I have to consolidate this audio. So I'm going to select this whole thing, hit Command J. That consolidates the audio for me. And now when we hear this back, we'll hear the difference in time up here. Cool, right? So last thing to do is double click on this audio region. We're going to go into the envelopes and we are going to select transposition modulation. And usually I use the Complex Pro, but I think when I made this song, for some reason I liked the tone algorithm. It just sounded cooler and different. And so basically starting from the top here, right from what is bar 2 here in our clip, I'm going to put a little point there. And then up to this point, measure 27, which is over here. I'm going to bring that up just about maybe 4 semitones. And then for the next section, I'm going to bring it up another little bit. And then for the last one, we're just going to go all the way up to like 2 octaves. Okay. Oop, made a little weird thing. All right, let's listen. All right, that's cool. Maybe we could try, let's see what Complex Pro looks like. I kind of like the weird glitchy stuff that happens inside of the tones algorithm. And that's pretty darn close. Let's see what the original sounds like. I'm doing some filtering and reverb effects. Yeah, so that whole sample now comes down to being masked. I'm going to go ahead and delete this, by the way. But the final step to make that sample then was just adding some delay and reverb and some filtering to kind of give it a lot of motion inside of that stuff. So it's not too like dry. It doesn't stand out. I'd like to show you, one more build effect that I did here on the second chorus. It's essentially the same idea. Here's the original vocal.
We hit replay.
She also ends on the word play there. But for this build, I wanted to do this exaggerated long EDM kind of build, like really build some tension to eventually have a payoff. And so I took that same vocal process and I applied it here to these new words, and check this out. And then a pitch bend. Yep. So you already know how I did it. And I basically did the same process on this one, and the end result was new. It sounded different, quite different, as a matter of fact. So let me see if there's any other vocal things. This last one is it's really short, but it's one of my favorite vocal moments. Let me just solo this. Let me play it in context, and then I'll solo it for you. So that's this little part right here. And this one I made pretty simply. This one I did literally just take this waveform and drag it down here. And then I manipulated it. So let's see what I added to this one. It looks like I added an amp. Let me turn all of these off and then we'll turn them on one at a time. So here's the unedited original. Oh, it looks like the filter's still on. Oh, all this stuff is still on. Hold on. Okay. So here's the original. Okay. Add this amp. Just kind of give some presence to it. But it was a little too much presence. So then I filtered it and turned it into kind of this radio effect. Then I had a flanger to give it kind of a watery effect. And then the last steps is just compression and limiting. Cool. And now let's hear it in context again. Yeah, so that way it just kind of takes your ear into this different zone, one measure before the drop comes back in. So yeah, that's all I'm going to be showing for the vocal part of this. Let's go to the sound effect part of this. There's a lot of sound effects in this song. I really love those big kind of trailer whooshes where they just come in and like crash and make this huge sound. So let's just take it from the top. Here's some of the sound effects going on. This one is probably one of my biggest staples. I do this type of effect almost all the time, sometimes on risers, sometimes on short reverse kind of sounds. But my secret sauce is this frequency shifter. So check out this one sound without the frequency shifter. Here you go. And now with. Pretty cool, right? So I don't want to spend time redoing my automation, but essentially this is what I've done. I've added the frequency I've automated the frequency is what I'm trying to say, so that you get this kind of like brrr effect when you change the frequency just slightly. You can hear it even kind of slows back down towards the end. So maybe on another tutorial, I'll give a breakdown of how I actually do that. But I'm basically just automating the frequency here, and it just makes that really cool kind of buzzy effect. And then right on the downbeat, we got this hit sound effect. Looks like a really low pass one. I think I low passed that specifically so that I could have the impact of that hit, but I didn't want it to overpower her vocal right there at the top of the song. So let's look at this build-up section. There's a lot of effects going on in this build-up. Main thing here is we got a white noise pump. Pretty sure that was a Splice sample. Thank you, Splice. Downlifter. The one above it here is a riser. And let's see, this bottom is just another sound effect hit. Yeah, I made that with this plugin that I have called Whoosh. I'm telling you, if you got, I think it's only like $40. If you got $40 and you like making EDM music, just go get Whoosh. It's so freaking radical. It makes incredible, really huge, heavy hitting sounds just like that. And then there's a reverse cymbal here. Looks like I added some reverb to that. And then that one's dry. And one of the last sound effects I made here is right on the top of the drop. I made this kind of laser sound effect. Check it out. So that I just made right inside of Serum. Pretty basic. It's just a sine wave and a saw wave. And I'm basically, with envelope number 2, I am modulating the coarse pitch of both of these to its full degree. And then as the note plays, it follows this envelope. So I'll play it one more time and you can see this envelope. Check it out. Yeah, pretty basic. And then I put a lot of reverb and a ping pong delay on there. But it really punctuates the downbeat. It really hits it really hard. Okay, let's solo just these sound effects in this buildup. Pretty cool. All right, let's listen to the whole track together right at this build-up, now that we know all the elements involved. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like it. It makes me happy at the very least. I hope you like it too. Let me see if there's any other secret sauce going on in this that I can show you before we wrap up. So I'll show you what I do with my mastering. So to go back to my mixing view, like I said, we have all of our individual tracks going into groups. And the main purpose is that we can then at the group level apply some compression, some EQ if we want to apply EQ to the whole group, and some limiting and then some volume control. And then at the master level, now we're looking at my master. Essentially, we've got a utility where I duck everything by an additional 10 dB. That's just kind of a habit I've been in ever since I started making music, because the idea with your master level is that you want to have the compressor actually doing something, and if your audio is too loud, it can't do much of anything. So then next to the utility, which is just ducking our level, I have these effects, which are really just high pass filter and reverb effects that I have added on the master. And I'm pretty sure I added these during the buildup. Yeah, so let's look at build number 2, and I'm sure you're going to see these exaggerated. There's just a little bit of high pass right here, so I cut out the lows. And then I believe I add some reverb. Yep, this is reverb. So essentially right on this drop, you get a little bit of reverb coming in on the master. And that just adds to this kind of crazy tension. But I don't overdo it, it's just a little bit. And then this high pass filter, what that's doing is that's cutting out the lows from the track. If you watch the EQ graph, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here's the EQ graph right here. You'll see it comes on and I start to cut out the lows. And it's not much. It only goes up to 100 hertz. And the reason for that is that I just want to cut out the sub information. I don't really want to get rid of the thump of the kick, but I want to cut out the subs so that if you're listening on a powerful system, you're not going to have the deepest kicks during that buildup. The deepest kicks are going to happen right at the top of the drop. So that's pretty much it for the DJ effects that I got going on the master track. Next, just got some compression, some glue compression. And then the main secret sauce is this plugin called Pusher by Infected Mushroom /Waves. Again, this is only a $40 plugin and I can't recommend it enough. I'm not endorsed by this plugin at all, but I just absolutely love it. I use it on all of my tracks now. And the main stuff is you got these 3 main knobs: high, magic, and low. And essentially it's high, mids, and lows. And it's kind of like multi-band compression with some EQ, and it does a bunch of stuff. Like if you want to know more about what's under the hood of this plugin, just type it in, go find it on YouTube. You'll find some explanation, I'm sure. But essentially what I use it for is to bring in the highs, to really help compress and accentuate all the mids and stuff. And then on the lows, what's really cool is you can select the key that your song is in, which mine utilizes mostly B flat, otherwise known as A sharp. It's funny to me they don't have B flat in here. It's all sharps. But yeah, so A sharp is the same thing as B flat. And my song it rides around B flat. The top of the chorus always hits at B flat. So I can select that And then I use this limiting knob to really bring up my master level. So let me show you the volume difference when this is turned off. So the plugin is now bypassed. I'm going to go to this last chorus. So the plugin is off. And now I'm going to turn it on. There's going to be a huge volume difference. And again, I'll have to make this in another, maybe more specific video about how I master my tracks and how I use this plugin. But essentially, these knobs are basically in this exact same position for almost any song that I master through this plugin. The only thing that really differs is the push knob, aka the limiting knob. That will change depending on the overall level that I'm dealing with. And then the final one here, I don't even think I'm using it for any kind of gain thing. It's just this is just a limiter to make sure that everything stays totally right at 0 point. But I could actually turn that off because the limiting on this plugin is more than enough. But yeah, so I guess that is basically my breakdown of this song. If you want to hear the full track, link is in the description down below. Again, you can find it on Spotify and iTunes and all of that. Just search for Pop Champagne OnenO Remix. The original song is by an artist named Sinclair. So search for Sinclair, search for OnenO, find Pop Champagne, and give it a listen. Let me know what you think. As always, please leave a comment down below so I can answer more questions that you might have on anything that I touched on or anything that I didn't touch on. And stay tuned for more videos like this. Subscribe to the channel, and until I see you again along the journey, oneness in sound, I am OnenO. Peace, everybody.
Support OnenO on patreon.com and gain access to exclusive content.